50. It's McGraw in the morning on the Big 550 KTRS.
All right, the board meeting is in session. John Diehl, House Majority Leader, editorial page editor Tony Messenger, and Jane Dueker from former Chief of Staff of Governor Holden. Tony Messenger, you are up.
20 years ago on Tuesday, the Great Flood of 1993 just sort of took over national headlines and completely flooded what was then called Gumbo Flats and is now the Chesterfield Valley. And it is serendipity, I don't know what it is, that on this 20th anniversary, what's happening tomorrow, the beginning of tomorrow, and then a couple of weeks later, not one, but two big new fancy outlet malls built in the floodplain with the help of taxpayer subsidy, with the help of cheaper land because the floodplain is still not valued the way that it should be. It is horrendous public policy, what we have done in the valley, because we rebuilt a levee to the tune of $70 million and believe that it's going to protect us from a 500-year flood. It's not going to happen. There will be another great flood that is bigger than 1993. It is going to flood the valley again, and the cost to us is going to be astounding. After that great flood, there was a report called the Galloway Report. It was commissioned by the White House. 30 of the nation's great water experts put together a bunch of recommendations on what to do, and St. Louis, particularly in the valley, has done everything the exact opposite of what the experts said to do to avoid the next big flood. And it just is amazing to me. Hey, I live out west. I shop in the valley, so I'm guilty. In fact, my kids having football practice this week right next to the levee. We're actually having football practice on the riverside of the levee. And so I'm part of the problem, but I have become on this quest since we wrote a series of editorials 2 years ago called One River, One Problem, in which I'm just trying to bring attention to the fact that we have not learned any of the lessons from 93. That flood is going to look like a tiny little drop of water in the ocean compared to the next one that's going to happen, because we keep building these bigger levees. We keep throwing more and more concrete down, which pushes the water to go somewhere else. We continue to have navigation channels in the Missouri River that aren't being used and have hardly ever really been used, that make the water run faster than it should. And all of that, the 93 report barely even dealt with climate change and the fact that the river keeps running higher and higher and higher than it has previously from the other floods. I'm just here to tell you, those two outlet malls, enjoy them this weekend, because someday they're going to flood.
You know what? I don't know where to start on that. We live in a river city. We have the Missouri River. We have the Mississippi River. Okay. This area has always and will always deal with flood issues. Might surprise most people, but downtown St. Louis is in a floodplain, and it's behind a levee. Okay, and I believe that's 1,000-year. Okay, and no one says, and when you do the math on the levees, it's not that a flood's only going to happen once every 500 years. It's the mathematical chance that a flood happens in any given year. Okay, so it's a 1 in 500 chance in any given year. Not that it's going to happen every 500 years. I lived in Chesterfield when the flood happened back in 93. I lived up on River Valley Drive at the top of the bluffs, and I could drive a quarter mile and see the river flow by down where all the commerce used to be. The flood, that levee was getting rebuilt, and if you're going to rebuild it, you might as well rebuild it stronger. Okay. And Chesterfield's been an economic engine. It's been an economic driver in this area. It's a place where people want to live, and people want services close to where they want to live. I think what Chesterfield did right in this is the residents are generally out of the floodplain.
Right.
Okay? So this is business. Business understands business risks. The insurance companies that write it understand the insurance risk behind it. It's planned out. It's mathematical. No, I've never heard one person say that a flood will never happen here again.
And this is the thing.
Actually, I have. Developer Michael Steinberg was quoted in the West News magazine as saying he doesn't worry about it at all. It's not going to happen.
Well,
You say not worry about it.
It is going to
Right.
happen.
You didn't say it's never
And
going to
this, and
happen.
this is the
happen.
thing. It is all planned. And I want to tell you now, if you gave me the choice of saying everything that all the good economic activity that occurred in Chesterfield Valley would not occur because we were afraid of a flood, and knowing full well that at some point it might flood again, I would still take all that commerce and all the economic activity it generated, even if it's not permanent. These people know that. You know, they're the companies that were there in '93. There weren't near as much. A lot of them are still there because they get that. Again, I agree, no residences. We don't, can't do that. But, business, they know what they're doing. And they've played this all out. And frankly, I think the Chesterfield Valley has been an economic boon that I wouldn't give up, even knowing that it would flood again.
Jane, here's why they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing because the risks are not balanced the way they should be. They can still do today what they did in 1993, which is wait until the water is a couple of days away, and 5 days before the water hits, they can buy a flood insurance policy and be completely bailed out by who? By me, by you, by John Diehl, by McGraw-Millhaven, by the taxpayers. This is... The businesses are smart. You're darn right there's 2 outlet malls there. Those outlet malls wouldn't be built there if they didn't have reduced risk compared to what it should be and reduced cost compared to what it should be because of welfare, because corporate welfare I'm talking about, and because of the fact that our flood insurance policies, our crop insurance policies, our federal disaster policies have never been adjusted to the reality of the flood.
This is private insurance.
This is that's just
It's private insurance. And
It's
guess
not
what?
public
Has
flood
anyone
insurance.
done the economic analysis that says, here's what it costs for a flood, here's the economic activity generated, and my understanding is the economic activity generated is a lot higher than dealing with the flood. That's business, it's economics, and as long as the residents and as long as people are not being displaced, commerce is not forever.
And
Get it
the
while you
levies
can.
and the levies and the improvement on those levies over and above what it was back in 1993 were funded by property owners that were within
Michael
that levy
Steinberg
district.
built that levy on behalf of Walmart.
Well,
That's who built the levy.
There was a
Well,
big tiff.
more
though,
than that.
It was a big tip.
There's
I agree.
TIFs, there's community
I agree.
improvement
But there are
districts.
also
We're all
assessments.
paying those
there are
costs
also
to some
assessments
degree.
on everybody else down there.
But that
who
issue is a
own land.
problem whether it's flood or any other reason.
And
If we wanna
downtown
talk
St. Louis
about
is behind
incentives-
It is a problem.
Right.
You guys keep talking about the economic driver and what a great economic boon this has been. Your kids would still play football somewhere else.
Yes, they would.
Absolutely.
You would go buy a Red Robin burger
Somewhere
somewhere
else.
That proves the point.
Well, the point is, though,
It doesn't prove the point. It's like
Chesterfield Valley, it didn't. How much has the economy or the population grown in the last 20 years?
Well-
it stayed stagnant. So,
Okay.
Oh, no, the
Well,
economic
McGraw-
boom
oh,
for
absolutely not.
Chesterfield, I've been
no,
alive.
no, no,
And
no, no, no,
here's
no.
my problem
For
with the argument.
Chesterfield, but for other places, it's gone down.
Maybe,
Here's
but
my
that
problem with the
happens,
argument.
with or
Is the
without.
policy going to be that we're never going to build in any place that can flood?
Right.
Okay.
Make
If
the
not,
call.
let's wipe out downtown St.
No,
Louis.
that's
now,
not- that's
now,
not what
now
anybody's
maybe with what
arguing.
happens, what Jane was arguing before, maybe downtown St. Louis gets wiped out anyway if that stupid initiative petition.
Well, it
passes.
might. That's
Yeah.
more dangerous
in
than
fact,
the flood.
In fact, that flood wall is probably operated by energy generated by.
Oh, then I guess we have to
Coal.
stop operating the
But-
levee in the city. You're
But
right.
but that being said, University City flooded a couple years back. Do we say we're not going to develop in University City anymore because that flooded?
That's a ridiculous straw man, John.
Why?
You're talking about whether or not you have balanced policies that say, look, you
Okay.
don't build in the floodplain when you can avoid it. Here's a good
Okay,
example.
so
Here's a good
University
example.
City.
Here's a good example. After the 2011 flood, which was horrendous in northern Missouri and up in Iowa, in the Dakotas, it was almost horrendous here. It barely stopped before St. Charles and St. Louis and a bunch of areas around here got massively flooded in 2011. But after that 2011 flood, in at least a couple of areas, the Corps of Engineers, Army Corps of Engineers, has worked with farmers in Iowa to say, you know what?
This is dumb.
Rather than rebuilding the levee in the same place like we always do, let's move it back a little bit. Let's give the water some room to roam. It is better both to reduce the risk of farming, it keeps costs down, and it helps us downstream. It's those sorts of balanced policies that ultimately we have to make so that we don't make river flooding worse. What we did in Chesterfield makes it worse when that flood ultimately comes.
Not necessarily.
That's
I don't
Tony
agree.
Messenger, and this is a capitalist program, so we need to make money. That's House Majority Leader John Diehl, Tony Messenger, Jane Dueker. We'll come back, wrap things up. The board meeting, the Big 550, KTRS, and STLtoday.com.
Looking